This is something that I talk about often, and I'm always happy to talk about it again. The reason why I'm talking about it is because some people online have been engaging in some rhetoric that has led to some discourse. And I love this discourse, okay? I swim in this discourse. I live in the discourse, all right? I have specially evolved gills to allow me to breathe while submerged in this discourse. Now, I'm not going to name any Kyle Kalinske and Shoe on Head. I'm not going to name any names, but some people have really risen to the forefront of this particular discourse, and I have some thoughts. I saw this at the front of my subreddit this morning. It's not what I would call the best look. I actually call it a fairly bad look, an unfortunate look, a cringe look even, maybe. So what are we responding to here? Because we need context. As always, context is important. Well, apparently, Shoe on Head is responding to CIA the bitch. Okay. And Kyle Kalinske. Kyle Kalinske, hello. Kyle Kalinske recently got some traction online. Well, I mean, Kyle Kalinske is a huge figure, so not recently, like, you know, but a segment of a video came out, and I want to take a look at that segment, and we're gonna have some thoughts, okay? Let's take a look, and then we'll say what we like, we'll say what we don't like, okay? Let's address the core of this, and please pardon the abominable quality of this video. Jesus, it's like we're being talked to by like the Mr. Potato Head, like it's just an orange spheroid. It's not even. It's like 144p. Yeah. Watch the original. We want to take a look at these clips, okay? We want to know where they began, where they ended. All right.
Intersectional. By the way.
Oh, sorry. This is in response to that CIA woke ad, which, by the way, was terrible. Okay.
No actual person in the real world uses that term unironically. It just doesn't happen. In elitist liberal academic circles, they might talk about this shit, but that's not a normal common person. It's not. There is nobody who's working a 9-to-5 and trying to pay the fucking bills who's also, thinking about intersectionality and being cisgender. That doesn't happen. On top of bringing up intersectionality, she brings up the patriarchy. So now do you see what's going on here? And by the way, this is not going to stop. So this is the CIA's doing it. The FBI's going to do it. The Democratic Party has been doing it for the longest time. I'm not for Medicare for all. I'm not for free college. I'm not for a living wage. I'm not for ending the wars. I'm not for ending the drug war and freeing the nonviolent drug offenders. I'm not for any of the actual policies that are important and would fix the country and make everything better. But I will say the word intersectional, and I will give you my pronouns in my bio. And I will create an identity around my generalized anxiety disorder and make you feel like I'm relatable. I will, say I'm on the LGBTQ spectrum, or I'm cisgender, or, I believe in diversity, and I have people of color in my family, or I'm a person of color. They will give you everything when it comes to labels, social issues. And by the way, it's hilarious that the CIA is doing the Democratic Party trick. I believe in diversity. I'm strong. I'm proud. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm a woman of color. I'm perfectly made. I'm proud of me. I'm a cisgender millennial. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm intersectional. I despise the patriarchy. And by the way, my main job is going to be to press the button on the drones that blows up innocent people overseas.
There's the clip. There are a few others that follow it, but that's the main one. We can talk about that. I appreciate all the people in chat getting angry at Kyle Kalinske for saying exactly the sort of thing that I've said in the past, at least sometimes. So let's talk about what we liked and what we don't like, okay? So here are the things that I like. A lot of what he says for the majority of this video is kind of a paraphrasing of something Malcolm X once said about the symbolic gestures, what are the symbolic concessions? I'm not familiar with the full, or I don't remember the full quote. But the idea is essentially this. The elites, you can talk about politicians, we can talk about the CIA, we can talk about corporations, whatever, people with social power, are more comfortable placating to what we consider to be intersectional demands, intersectional wishes, than they are meaningful class based issues. And that is completely true. See, we live in a capitalist society. And in a capitalist society, the structure of power, the ways in which power is distributed, is determined in large part by wealth or proximity to wealth. In the Marxian sense, it would be proximity to the means of production, which, while not always, very often overlaps with wealth. Makes sense, right? So, in such a society where the real power is concentrated predominantly around wealth, it's easy for those in power to make concessions on non class based issues. Does it hurt capitalism to lean up on racism, to lean up on transphobia? Does it hurt the power structures inherent to American society to allow gay people to marry? Well, not really. I mean, some of them, sure. White supremacy is very entrenched in American society, and the reduction of racism in America does challenge that, and I think that's worthwhile. I would argue that the principle, the largest and strongest and most heavily defended power structure in America is based around class. But that's not to say there aren't other ones as well. So, in this respect, I kind of agree. There's a frustration that I have with liberals where, well, we all make fun of this with the, woman drone pilot kind of thing, right? Where people will overlook systemic injustice as long as that systemic injustice is being presented in a diverse way. That's why that CIA advertisement was so frustrating. It's like, it's the CIA. It's the fucking CIA. I mean, the CIA has been responsible for cultivating so much misery around the world in its time. And then they're like, we have a proud Latina, cisgender, millennial, anyone can work here. We're an intersectional workplace. And it's like, okay, we know what you're doing here. What you're trying to do is get on people's good side by placating to the easy progressive topics without, addressing the real problems. Does that make sense? We all understand how this is a cynical invocation of liberal identity politics for the benefit of existing power structures. You know, oh, we can't get rid of the CIA. We can't get rid of big corporations controlling our government, but we can make sure that the boards controlling those corporations are 50% POC. Like, okay. That being said, I do think diversity is a virtue in and of itself. I like it when there's diversity. I like it when intersectional analysis is applied. But the problem that I have is, and this is the problem I have with what Kyle Kalinske said, is that has nothing to do with intersectionality. What the CIA did was a very cynical appeal to identity politics. But intersectionality isn't identity politics. When I use the term liberal identity politics, what I usually mean is like a cynical invocation of progressive rhetoric in order to placate people's concerns about a broader institutional failure or injustice. You know what I mean? Oh, sure, Nestle is bad, but look at that woman CEO. They don't have a woman CEO. I'm just giving an example. Oh, American imperialism is bad, but look, it's a girl boss doing this. Like that kind of thing. That's what I think of when I think liberal identity politics. It's a very thin veneer of progressivism used to disguise the same old broken machine. But intersectionality is not this. Kyle Kalinske opens this video saying nobody talks about intersectionality, maybe liberal elites in their academic woke circles or whatever. And I really, really dislike this messaging for a lot of reasons. First of all, intersectionality is an excellent way of identifying, understanding, and addressing the problems that we all face. Intersectionality isn't just more black people in college dean positions. It's a lens of analysis by which we recognize that we all have our advantages and disadvantages. We all have our social benefits and boons and detriments, all the ways in which we're oppressed and oppressors. And only by understanding all of it can we begin to fix these things. Intersectionality, if properly applied, is how you address topics like men's rights, for example. It's only through third wave feminism, which is intersectional, that issues like the ways in which patriarchy negatively affects men became to be understood. Second wave feminism didn't focus on that. It didn't really have a way of addressing those issues because it wasn't intersectional. And meanwhile, modern intersectional analysis, it's not just about like POC positions and corporate boards or whatever. Intersectionality is what can inform us that white people are suffering a particular kind of social and cultural alienation that has led to their high suicide rate. Now, I'm not saying intersectionality is only valuable because there are privileged groups who benefit from it. I'm only pointing out that to conflate intersectionality and liberal identity politics just because the CIA used the term intersectionality in an advertisement is very irresponsible to me. And the opening statement from Kyle Kulinski, only liberal academics talk about this, strikes to me very similar to this really bad tendency I see from some populists online, where when they say the working class, what they mean is the white working class. There's a bit of an overlap there. Oh, the regular people, they don't deal with intersectionality. This is an academic thing. Well, to be fair, Marxist analysis is also not something the average person banties about, but the ideas are relevant to everyone. And to say it like that, it kind of makes it seem like, oh, progressivism, intersectionality, these are like frivolous, offhand issues cared about only by a collection of soy-faced academic elites. Real people care about working class issues. Okay, well, the most predominant working class demographic in America is and always has been brown and black people. We had them as slaves, we had them as railroad workers, and we still keep them in our inner cities and underpay them in tenements that we improperly fund. They are the bulk of the working class. If you take a look at the percentage of black and brown people who are working class and you put it up against the number of white people who are working class, then it's clear the working class is an intersectional term. If your understanding of the working class is derived exclusively from some 1950s era like misconception of like the white factory worker in a union, you know what I mean? This is not this it's a bad road to go down. If you want to criticize liberal idpol, go for it. God knows I do it. I do it all the time. But do not diss intersectionality or intersectional analysis just because the terms associated with it get misused, get cynically employed by corporations. Here's an interesting hypocrisy that I've noticed. You know, all those leftists or left-leaning people who are like, intersectionality is stupid, we should focus on class issues. And the reason they say that is because like woke corporations misuse this terminology. You know what I mean? Like, I see that all the time. It's like, you know, uh, Coca-Cola had a Black Lives Matter stamp. Black Lives Matter has been co-opted by corporations. Why don't the types of people who say that ever complain about working class issues being co-opted by Tucker Carlson? Why? See, my issue with liberal idpol is that when corporations misuse it to sell their products, they denigrate a valuable social movement. I don't see those types of people complain about Tucker Carlson, even though what Tucker Carlson does is dishonest, misleading, it denigrates real working class issues, and it brings tens of millions of members of the proletariat onto a fundamentally counterproductive and outright destructive political road. But I don't see these types like Shoe on Head online who see what Tucker Carlson says and go, oh, class-based issues are being abused by the elites. I don't care about them anymore. I'm going to focus on Black Lives Matter now. I don't see that. Actually, I see leftists like that saying Tucker Carlson's based. I don't say it's based when Coca-Cola puts out a Black Lives Matter advert, even though I like Black Lives Matter. I'm capable of of recognizing the degraded invocation of my political ideals, criticizing them, and then moving on. But it seems like the fact that this particular type of populist leftist is willing to drop intersectionality because of its proximity to woke corporations, but isn't willing to drop class-based analysis on account of its proximity to Tucker Carlson, makes me think that a lot of them just kind of resent progressivism. And that's the thing that worries me a little bit. that underneath the woke CIA corporations are being annoying thing, the underlying trend still exists. That these people, even though, and I want to emphasize this very, very clearly, okay? I do not for a moment believe that Shiwan Head is a reactionary, nor do I believe this of Kyle Kalinske. I simply do not believe it. Having spoken with them, having seen their content, I don't think that. What I think is that they're susceptible to abandoning the political advocacy for these positions if they feel it's necessary for something they consider more important, aka the Gospel Vortex. That they've convinced themselves there's some kind of antagonistic relationship between fighting for progressivism and fighting for class-based issues. Maybe not 100% of the time, but sometimes, in some niche ways, there are frictions, antagonisms between the two. And at those times, it is prescient to prefer an advocacy for class-based issues over an advocacy for more identity-based issues. It's something that correlates heavily with populism, which I consider myself a populist, but it's a problem that I've noticed online. Now, again, I want to be super, super clear here. I'm not saying that they're reactionary, because I don't believe that. If I said or implied that, that would be a lie from me, and I don't intend on lying to any of you. What I want to offer, though, is a bit of a criticism, okay? A suggestion, maybe. What I'm about to say is factually correct. It is factually correct whether you are a social democrat, whether you are a progressive liberal, whether you are a Marxist-Leninist, whether you are a Maoist, whether you are a anything, any type of left-leaning person. As long as you believe that workers' rights should be promoted, and also believe that minorities in the traditional sense should be fought for, should be defended, as long as you believe those two things, what I'm about to say is objectively correct, and there is no arguing with me, so don't try. There is no contradiction whatsoever between advocating for social minorities' rights, for progressivism, and advocating for workers' rights. None. Zero. There is absolutely no, at no point, no vertice, no intersection, nothing. There's no point where there's a fight between these two things. People will lie to you and tell you that there is, and they're wrong. Every time they're wrong, always, and history shows it very clearly that they are wrong, okay? You can look through history and see a litany of examples. Every time leftists are convinced that they have to give up advocacy for progressive issues to push harder for class issues, they die because they lose their ability to build coalitions. There are not a billion socialists on this planet. Not even close. There are many progressives. And if you are a leftist, if you advocate for workers' rights, it is in your best interest. Leaving aside the inherent moral worth of defending progressive issues, there is an inherent need to appeal to progressives who are not explicitly socialist, who are not explicitly in favor of basic economic advocacy for the working class. And you cannot do that if you abandon progressivism. You will fall down the hole that people like Tucker Carlson want you to fall down. First, you will become, think of it as a medical condition. First, you will find yourself useless. You will stop focusing on necessary, important, pressing, predominant political issues and find yourself focusing more and more and more on an increasingly marginal and strawmanned perspective of woke intersectional SJWs. You will begin to define your existence in opposition to these people. Shiwan Head, I see how you act on Twitter. You can't delete those tweets fast enough to avoid my eyes. You will define yourself in opposition to the existence of these people, and you will allow your other political positions to be motivated by your dislike for these groups. Now, I want to be clear, by the way. I see the way people treat Shiwan Head. I agree with one thing and one thing more than anything else I've ever... I agree with this more than I've agreed on anything else, okay? These people, these SJW progressive lefty soak-demi types, are insufferable. There are a lot of insufferable woke scolds on the internet. I know. But when you allow yourself to be defined by, when you allow yourself to be guided by, in large part a dislike of these people, you run down really hairy waters, okay? Really, really hairy waters. Really rocky roads? It's a bad road to go down, okay? Don't. And if you go further down that path, you will begin to convince yourself of more and more destructive things, that these people are the root of the problem in America, that we could have workers' rights if it weren't for these annoying SJWs, and that the real way, the best way to advocate for real progressivism is to get those groups out of the way. And how do you do that? You define yourself in opposition. Inside, internally, you still believe all the things you used to. You're still progressive. You still believe in trans rights. You still believe in gay marriage, etc., etc. But you, with a heavy heart, you realize siding with the progressives only forestalls, only perpetuates the cycle. You need to step away from them and allow their movement to fall. And once their movement falls, once we no longer have these irritating SJWs, then people will be amicable to working class issues. But by that point, it's too late, because you have been doing the work of reactionaries. And at that point, you no longer have a movement on your side. Your rights get stripped. Your rights get taken away. There's nobody left standing beside you. And at that point, you can make a choice. You can either fall in with the lot you've cultivated and just become a conservative or a fascist, depending on how far things go. Or you can sullenly walk back to the now desolated progressive space that previously existed. You cannot allow this to happen. We must all stand together. Progressivism and class issues are one and the same, and they have to be advocated for in tandem. It's absolutely necessary. There is no contradiction between the two. No point, no flaw in intersectional analysis that prevents the simultaneous advocacy of both. Does anyone here disagree with that? It's important to remember. Now, again, I largely believe these criticisms are motivated by a good faith effort to improve the space that we have, politically and online. And I am frustrated by the predominance of liberals who invoke intersectionality in bad faith to mitigate concerns of these organizations. But here's another thing to keep in mind. Republicans do the same thing. If you take a look at Republican messaging, they pull the exact same id poll arguments, not just for white people. They do it for minorities too. Did you see the RNC in 2020? Holy shit. That was every black Republican they brought up there. That was crazy, you know? They do the exact same thing. The RNC does the same thing. Now, do they do it in the same ways? No, but they do the exact same cynical appeals to progressive intent. In a way, what the Republicans do is actually a lot more destructive, because they will try to convince people to abandon criticisms of their organizations, not even because they will receive rights for it, the way the Democratic Party kind of postures at, but just because they'll be accepted within an organization that doesn't respect their rights. In a way, that's actually quite a bit worse, you know? If I have to deal with like a cynical id poll, I would rather the Democrats say, trans people stand with us and we'll help you, than the Republicans say, trans people, just vote for us. You get what you get. You deserve what you deserve. I mean, I don't know. Christ. Stand together. Link arms. There's no argument to be had here. Okay? There's no reason to fight over this. I do agree, there are plenty of legit criticisms of liberal id poll, but for God's sake, this is just not something worth bringing about divisions over. Oh, and a final point, one final point, by the way. Americans don't use the term intersectionality very often in their day-to-day lingo, but they use its ideas daily. Almost all of them. No matter where you are, where you work, who your friends are, who your family is. Even if you're a white cis dude, I mean, even if you're as heterodox as they, not heterodox, sorry, as hegemonic as they come, identity-wise, the terms, the concepts are deeply relevant to you. It's important to keep that in mind. Now, people aren't running around saying, I'm a cisgender millennial, but intersectionality informs the ways in which we think about the world. Can you give us a definition of intersectionality? Oh, I thought I did at the beginning, but yeah, sure. Intersectionality basically is just a type of sociological analysis that makes an effort to understand the ways in which all types of demographics, I mean, race, class, gender, sexuality, um, intersect with one another, the ways in which all of the social benefits and social detriments of each intersect and play off each other. So, for example, there are problems that affect black people and there are problems that affect men, but then there are problems that pretty much just affect black men. Does that make sense? There are issues that affect black men, but not so much black women, and then there are issues that affect like white women, but not so much black women, like that kind of stuff. Previous movements, previous lens of analyses have struggled to find ways to analyze the relationships between these issues. Second wave feminism was pretty specifically about like middle class white women. For that reason, it excluded poor women, it excluded women of color. It wasn't very effective in bringing any light to the issues they faced. So this is better. It's a better system. And it's not like an SJW thing. Again, it's also a really good way of addressing the problems experienced by non-marginalized communities. Anyway, that was just my thoughts. All right.